as to kind of like our objectives for the interview today?
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah, so both of us work with perfectionism in therapy. So we're kind of supporting perfectionists and navigating their perfectionism better, right? Kind of acknowledging what are the kind of pros and cons that come with it. Hopefully live a more authentic life, right? Less stress, more in tune with themselves, or doing things because they want to do, not feel like because they have to do it, right? I think one of those big important things that can take away just the experiences in life, right? When we're just doing something because we have to do it. So being more authentic with yourself, with your life, and with others. So that's our aim, to kind of, support our clients with that. So we're having kind of discussion today on, maybe how to recognize perfectionism in yourself, being in tune with what works for you, what doesn't, and how does therapy can probably help, right, in overcoming perfectionism. So those are our main points here today.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel, but I don't remember really getting much kind of guidance or grad school I don't remember there being a focus, at least for my program, really on perfectionism. I feel like a lot of times, especially with the clinical route that a lot of us do in order to work in therapy, it doesn't, sometimes we miss out on these like presentations or experiences that don't necessarily fit perfectly into like a diagnosis.
Right.
So I think, which is why one reason I'm glad that you reached out and wanted to do this is to really understand perfectionism from a different lens and not see it either as pathology, but just understand, why that could be something we struggle with, and how you and I help folks that maybe want to explore their perfectionism in therapy.
Yes, yeah, I do. Well, as a recovering perfectionist, and then learning about that experience myself, and then recognizing in others as well, more and more, like I just realized, like, oh, this is really bigger than all of us. Like, it's truly a phenomenon, and it is worth bringing attention to it and shedding light to it, because it could, like I said, it could really take away your experiences in life, right, if we let it. So being more on top of it and being more aware is crucial. So yeah, I'm glad that we could connect and have this conversation as well.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
having
So
me.
thank you. So if you're ready to kind of introduce yourself and your practice a little bit. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm Joanna. I'm licensed in Montana, Washington, D.C., and Maryland, primarily focus on folks in Montana. That's where I live and where my practice is based. And gosh, it's always hard to kind of say the areas that we work with, because I do work with a lot of types of folks.
Yeah.
But if I had to summarize it, I really love helping clients work on self-worth, people pleasing, kind of like understand their emotions, particularly how anxiety manifests for folks, and the intersections with perfectionism. I also do a lot of eating response work. So what categorically would be like eating disorders. So helping folks kind of have a healthier relationship and connection to their bodies and food.
Very important. And there is definitely, I spoke with actually an eating disorder specialist who also works with perfectionism. There's definitely a link to it, and being more aware of that. I want to answer someone. So thank you for your message. So I'm going to try to, I think this might be recorded for later use. So I'll try to post this if you guys are missing it. I have to leave early. I'm going to try my best to upload it later on Instagram for you guys to watch.
Perfect.
Yes. So there's definitely a connection between those two. Do you provide both online and in person, like kind of like a hybrid mode?
Yes, both. So most of my clients I see in my office, which I'm in now, but I do offer telehealth as well for folks in Montana, and then some clients that I have on East Coast.
Great. What are what are you noticing as far as like being able to provide hybrid, like any benefits to that?
So many. I mean, it really depends on the person. I've done personally myself, seen therapists in office and online, and it really depends on, I think, the person and what fits for them. Obviously, with a lot of folks having more flexibility or working remotely, or a day like today in Montana, maybe not wanting to drive into the office.
Right. Or can drive if the highway's closed. Difference between want and can't. Yeah.
Totally. So I guess the choice and agency for folks to decide, what fits for them. So I love it. It works for me. I do also appreciate that in-person connection. So, but I know all of us are different.
That's awesome. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone, it's kind of like a learning style, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a different, yeah, approach or interest, and providing both is really
Mm-hmm.
helpful. All right, so let me find, yeah, the rest of the questions here. I was there for a second ago. Okay. What led you to specialize in working with perfectionism specifically? Was there a personal or professional experience that drew you
Mm. I would say kind of how I mentioned a little bit ago, just sort of the misunderstandings around it.
to it?
And I think what led me to want to specifically work with clients on perfectionism is seeing how it was so embedded in what a lot of in a lot of what we go through, right? Whether someone is coming to therapy for anxiety, or coming to therapy for self-worth, or coming to therapy for, family trauma, coming to therapy for their relationship with food or body, really seeing how perfectionism was kind of a thread underneath so many areas that I was helping clients with, and realizing, that it's very common and we have misconceptions about what it really is. And so, yeah, it just sparked so much curiosity in me, wanting to also understand it from a clinical lens, but also for myself as well. Seeing how, it's coping, and it's often a way that we've learned how to safety seek or present in a certain way. So it just felt so tied to how we understand our feelings and how we learn to navigate, uncertainty and unpredictability. So yeah, I would say it was realizing it was much more common than we think, and also very misunderstood in the same
Very
light.
true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. It has both like a positive and negative connotation, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we say like I'm a perfectionist, like sometimes it could be like, oh, that means you have control issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we see it as a positive, like, oh, that means you're just like a hard worker.
Right.
Right? It could be either way, perceived in different ways, but there's so much layer and context to it. It's
Yeah.
not just that. Yeah, there's so much like superficial definition to it. It's really much more, complex and intricate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I imagine you can relate too. And in the work that we do, right, we're really trying to help people understand and get to know parts of them that, have certain fears or certain beliefs. And so underneath so much of that, I just kept hearing similar sentiments, right? If like, I don't do this work thing good enough, I will lose credibility. Or if I'm not the perfect partner or daughter or friend, am I still good? Will I still be loved? Will I still have community? Right? If this experience doesn't go exactly how I will want, will I be able to tolerate that? Like, what will happen? So a lot of these fears that, make sense and are understandable if we know where they're coming from, but that create that often like starting point of perfectionism being something that takes over, of like wanting to present in a certain way, or wanting, to have, a little mask to protect ourselves. So.
Or trying to, I think the word that just came up for me was like trying to impress other people.
Yeah, right.
Like a driving force.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. What are some common traits? I know sometimes we're probably going to be touching on these questions, like jumping ahead, but what are some common traits or behaviors you notice in clients who struggle with
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism?
This is honestly one of my favorite questions related to perfectionism, because it really highlights what we see and what we don't really see, right? So a lot of times if I bring up perfectionism, I'm like, hey, I think I'm noticing the sense. This sounds a little bit like perfectionism. I'll have clients that are like, no, 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 like I'm not good enough to be considered a perfectionist, right? No, I don't do that well. So I like to bring up this notion of, like an iceberg, classic metaphor, like
Yeah,
the
what we
things that
see on
we
the surface,
see.
what's going on.
Yeah, right. So the things that we see are those traits that we think are being like, I don't know, like driven, disciplined, hardworking, reliable, consistent, high achieving. But what we don't see, and what is also part of perfectionism, is procrastination, not feeling good enough, super high self criticism, self doubt, fear of judgment, fear of failure, um, so much more that, doesn't feel categorically like perfectionism, but is part
Yes.
of perfectionism. So I would say those are the traits I actually look more towards, because they tell us more about what those fears are that are going on that present as perfectionism. So those are kind of the common traits that I will definitely help folks really understand, especially those like outcomes. Like if this doesn't happen, my life will be over, that kind of sentiment.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The word that came to mind for me was avoidance.
Yeah.
So like very, yeah, pretty much next to none of risk taking either. Like it's just a lot of, yeah, like I said, for me, fear of failure, fear of being judged. So a big part of perfectionism behavior is also just avoiding anything that could be remotely criticized about them, right? Or yeah, potential failure as well. Something else I remember, and this was actually when you're answering the other question, it slipped my mind earlier, but I want to ask, like, I think you mentioned something that made me think of like people pleasing tendencies. If you could kind of, yeah, if that is something you notice with perfectionist clients as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would also put that on the belly of the iceberg, right? What we don't often see is other behaviors that, you know, can be coming from the desire to control a certain experience or outcome, or like you said, impress or be liked, not be judged, those kinds of things, and how that can be part of perfectionism, right? Like wanting to have the sense of control or sense of safety. And it can look like, yeah, people pleasing or avoidance, even, or burnout. So it's kind of like there's so much more there when we ask the right questions. But we often see perfectionism in this very specific way that is not the whole picture.
Yeah, hard to say no. I think it tends to be another big one.
Yeah,
taking on more work or tasks and responsibilities, trying to take care of other people as well. Trying to take care of their well-being. As well, like fitting in the role of what they think they should be doing. Because like I achiever. So a lot of burnout and fatigue that might come with it.
totally. Yep. Because of the sustainability of it, right?
Yes, we're only human. There's only so much we can do. I know sometimes we want to get to it all for whatever reason, but yeah, we want to be mindful of our own limitations, and it's okay. It's safe to say like we have limitations. I think that's like a hard for perfectionists to wrap their mind around. Like, no, I have to be perfect at all times, right? Challenge yourself and ask yourself, like, does perfect even really exist? And what's that part of you that maybe has a hard time saying I'm not perfect? And tune into that voice a little bit.
Exactly, right? I mean, there's just so much more to it. So I appreciate that, even as both being providers that work in this area, that there's just so much more to understand and to kind of consider that it's not just what we think. And if we ask the right questions, we can understand what are some of the fears going on so that we can learn how to address those.
What comes to mind now is the word compassion. I'm wondering, like, how would you, help your clients when you develop compassion?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're working with perfectionism, this is for someone that may, I don't know, be tuning in and resonating with some of this, or maybe another therapist who works with clients or seeing how perfectionism, you know, presents in their work. I am very compassion oriented, and that is definitely a big modality that I use because I think it can help create that connection to ourselves and have a different relationship with ourselves, especially around like self-talk. And I think Dr. Neff, who specializes and does a lot of research on compassion, talks about that common humanity piece. And so, you know, considering how perfectionism is often this like mask or way to cope with fear or anxieties that might be coming up, having compassion for human experiences, like you said, right? Like we're all human at the end of the day. We can't be perfect. There's going to be experiences that are hard or things that don't go our way, and having that instead of that critical voice come in and create like shame and blame and the desire to like have any uncomfortable emotions be resolved by just doing more and proving oneself or trying to like meet this expectation to be good enough. Compassion is saying like, hey, hang on, let's check in here, right? Like it's okay. Things are going to be hard. You know, how can you support yourself through that without pushing yourself harder or not letting yourself rest or take a break or set a boundary or say no.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, I feel, a huge part of learning how to work on perfectionism and maybe have more like an adaptive perfectionism, as opposed to one that feels very like crushing and in that cycle of procrastination, self-limiting beliefs, all of that. So big on incorporating compassion into
Yeah, I think that's
perfectionism work.
probably like one of the biggest tools we can use when we're trying
Yeah.
to navigate perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple things came to mind. So one, um, yeah, when we're talking about compassion, I was thinking about how sometimes perfectionists struggle with, I have to be special, I have to be the best, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thought, and then how compassion can be tricky, right? Because sometimes we think, well, if I'm being compassionate, then I'm being too nice to myself and I'm going to fall behind,
Right.
but I have to be on top of everything. So I wonder, yeah, how would you address
Yeah.
that?
So Dr. Neff has a fantastic book called Fierce Self-Compassion. And it talks a lot about how fierce self-compassion is being able to support ourselves through taking accountability and responsibility and really like helping ourselves. You know, sometimes compassion is getting up when you say you're going to get up or doing something hard and challenging yourself. But it's really like the belief system around that. So I'm totally with you. I think a lot of people have beliefs about self-compassion and like, no, that's too gushy, that's too soft, that will make me work less. I won't, I'll be even less of who I want myself to be, or I'll let go of myself, or all of these fears that come out. And I think that speaks to that like self-criticism piece feeling so strong, like it has control, but it's really a false sense of control, because we know the more you try to control something, the less control you actually have. So it's seeing compassion as, the way that we would talk to a friend or someone that we love or care for. It doesn't mean we like let people off the hook all the time. We also don't have to be assholes. We can be kind in our self-talk and also take care of ourselves and like show up for hard things or take risks.
Yeah, I would say that's one of those false beliefs or mistaken beliefs that like I have to treat myself like this in order to motivate myself to do it. That I think that's one of those biggest mistaken beliefs when it comes to being a perfectionist. Like you don't have to talk to yourself that way at all. Like we can be softer, kinder, kind of like you would with your friends. You said.
Yeah. I mean, I always say like fear will do a lot for us, right? But fear is also only going to take us so far. So if people feel motivated by fear, which a lot of time is kind of underlying perfectionism, like, yeah, you'll probably get somewhere, but it will also feel really painful and you'll have a lot of,
it could also hold us back. So that's where you want
exactly.
to, weigh the pros and cons here. Like if it's working for you, to what degree, and then how is it not working for you?
Exactly. Yeah, to what degree? Because if that also comes with a lot of self-doubt and like more self-criticism and procrastinating, like, is that really working? Or is fear just like creating that fight or flight response that, yeah, you'll submit this work thing, but maybe it doesn't have to feel that shamey. And there's another way to take care of ourselves. So, yeah.
Yeah, something that just came up for me too. Like one of those mistaken beliefs, like in order to be success, like stress equals success. Like I cannot be successful without being stressed. Like that's just like a natural, normal part of having to be successful.
Yeah.
How would you address that if someone said that in a session?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, there's so many ways I would look at that. I sometimes like to ask, what models people had in their lives. That's where some of that like attachment piece or family work can help us understand like how we learn, like values and understand our belief systems. Because I think a lot of times, and especially for women, right, do we see women that are compassionate and take care of themselves a rest? And I think for a lot of people, the views we have of women are, you have to like always be stressed and always be busy and always be doing a lot. And, I've had clients say like, I've never seen, right, my mom like take a break or say no or take care of herself or be kind in her self-talk. So of course, a lot of times we see stress equaling success, but it's limiting, right? Again, like we're saying, it only takes us so far. The body's going to do, it's going to listen to what you're telling it to do, but there's a point in which it will force you to rest or you know, like burnout may be a sign that you're not listening to some of those cues. And so I think I would help people reframe that, like, actually, we have more capacity when we are able to be compassionate or take care of ourselves or like restore a little bit. Like, actually, so much more is available to us. And that's really like, that's not just our opinions as therapists, this is neurobiology. Like, we have more capacity when our nervous system has that sense of safety and connection to ourselves, and stress will not actually do everything we think it will.
That's a I think great way to kind of challenge, I guess, one of those kind of mistaken beliefs, right? That this is the only way to be successful. Is that there's a more compassionate approach that could actually make you even more successful, like could actually expand your potential, right? It's not
Exactly.
just to go about.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Like, expanding your potential while also having, you know, like a connection with yourself.
Listening to our body. I think so much of it is right. Like, and like you said, like role models. Like, who are the role models around us? Did they, you know, tune in with themselves or with others, like emotions, right? And how did you see that working for them? Is that the way you want to live your life as well? Maybe addressing, again, it's just our mind tends to, it's monkey see, monkey do, but we don't really stop and think, like, yeah, what am I doing? Do I really like this? Is this really, is my body okay with this or not, right? So, like, listening to what your body's telling you is really
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the success piece is so interesting, and we could probably have a 5-hour conversation about this, but also, like, I think a lot of the systems that we have in place and the values that we hold as a society, like, do teach us that, even if I don't believe it's actually true.
Right?
Yeah.
Just push through the
Right.
pain. If it's
Push
even
through
there.
it, you know, like, do more, you know, do more than the next person. It's such a doing culture.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that makes us really sick.
Yes.
So,
And that just reminded me, yeah, that message too was like if you admit that you're not suffering, sorry, struggling, then that equals being weak. And it's like we can't, yeah. And as a perfectionist, or like I can't be weak, right? I have to be on top of it, do everything, get it all done perfect. So just any remote admitting of like I'm having a hard time. I don't think a perfectionist would have a hard time probably saying that.
yeah, and that's where their compassion could be really helpful, right? Of kind of like listening to what your body may be saying and helping yourself in the way that you would someone else, right? If a friend was coming to someone feeling like there's so much self-criticism and doubt and they're struggling and they're so tired, as a friend, I'd be like, hey, girlfriend, like, what do you need? Let's just like take a sec. Let's just lay here. Let's just put some music on. Like, come over. So really being able to slow down, but that's so hard when a lot of those societal forces are at odds with that.
Absolutely. And just I know that you're right. We can go talk about this for hours. It's one of those topics, right? But yeah, what came to mind is like values, right? Like there's so much like that's enforced on us. Like this is how you're supposed to do things. This is what you're supposed to value. So taking that moment, like in therapy or in our sessions, or if you're doing like self-help books, workbooks, whatever it may be, to check in with yourself about your own values. Like, do you really want to live life based off that type of value? Not what is it? Is family and connection maybe more important?
Yeah.
How can we uh, emphasize that for you?
100%. Yeah, I mean, compassion, values, those are two very significant ways to work on some of that perfectionism.
Yeah, so yeah, I think those are some big tools. So let's see what we have next. Yeah, again, I figured this was going to happen. We're going to jump ahead a little bit as I get curious with your answers. But yeah, the next question was going to be, what are some of the most effective strategies or approaches you use with clients to help them manage or reduce perfectionism? So I know we kind of mentioned compassion values there, but yeah, if anything else comes to mind.
Totally. Yeah, they're all going to kind of integrate with how we talk about it, of course. I mean, definitely the first thing that I tend to do is help folks and help someone I'm working with, like, understand where perfectionism like came from, originated, right? Was it always there? Was it a response to environment, circumstance, beliefs? Like, where does it really come from? And that looks like understanding what some of those fears are. So, you know, being able to kind of name it and express it and identify that. Obviously, like we know that insight and awareness can only take us so far, but it is also really important to understand what role and what function perfectionism plays. So really like identifying it and getting to know it a little bit, kind of like with an IFS approach, I find really helpful. And then, yeah, like building compassion, learning how to connect with yourself and your body from like a loving care lens, and noticing the difference in how that feels to our body, right? 10 out of 10 times, it will actually feel better. Maybe not at first when it's not practiced, but if we can open up to a different way of seeing ourselves and speaking to ourselves, like, again, this is neuroscience. It will help us feel better and help our emotions regulate and help our body, like feel more connected. So, yeah, those are big. I would also say like distress tolerance skills and learning how to sit with anxiety. How do I sit with discomfort? Right? How do I be okay with maybe someone not liking me or someone judging me, and knowing myself enough, right? That's going to be hard, but maybe I can handle that. And so really learning how to tolerate a lot of those uncomfortable feelings, especially with perfectionism, often being something that, again, is like a way to cope. That makes sense. You never want to feel anxiety or uncomfortable or judged. Yeah, perfectionism is going to take over and make sure that never happens. It won't last, of course, and it's not sustainable. But when we can learn how to, be with our feelings or, connect with our emotions, even the ones that we don't like, or even the ones that are unpleasant, like it really helps us create, a different relationship to ourselves.
Yeah. It's wild just how many different thoughts came out from just hearing you ask this question. Like my mind went like so many different places again, because we could talk about this for hours. I guess the first one, I think when you said the word practice, it just reminded me again, we're so habitual at being critical for ourselves for literally in almost anything and everything. So even the work we do in therapy when we're trying to be less critical, and let's say we're not doing great at that goal, let's say, we could even criticize ourselves like, oh, there I go, I did it again. Like I was being critical, like even being critical about being critical, right? And that's just, it's such a knee-jerk reaction to how we respond. So wondering again, I guess if I were to turn that into a question, like how do you help your clients maybe be more patient with themselves, I guess, as they're practicing these new tools?
Yeah, it's such a good point, because sometimes when I will introduce self-compassion, and maybe someone's homework is like work on that for the week, and then the next week it's like, oh, I wasn't really good at it.
Yes, yeah. It's not going to change overnight. Sorry to tell you. I know we want it to, but it takes some time. Yeah,
exactly. So to your point, right, of it like being a practice, and that this isn't something to perfect. We're not going to perfect self-compassion, but can we see it as a process and something that's always available, right? It's there. It's going to be there. We just want to turn towards it and incorporate it.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And it kind of reminded me too, like that is to the point of perfectionism. Like so much of it is about high expectations or maybe unrealistic expectations and standards, and how that might kind of come into play. So maybe having that conversation. Yeah, let's check in. What is the perfectionist expectation you have here about your therapy process, right? Like what you're expecting yourself to get out of it or to contribute to or whatever it might be. And what feels like a more balanced way instead.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that came to mind was, you're absolutely correct that it's all anxiety based, our behaviors when it comes to perfectionism, right? It's to get rid of that discomfort or anxiety. So the antithesis is, right, to let go of perfectionism, like you said, as much as it might make us uncomfortable, but that's the point to it, like change is uncomfortable, is to learn to sit with the discomfort, right? Learn to sit and tolerate, like I said, these uncomfortable feelings. Like if you really want to let go of your perfectionism or manage it better, that's going to be the biggest key.
Which is so
and trusting yourself
hard.
To handle. But trusting yourself that you can handle.
Definitely. Yeah. It can be so hard. And so, definitely another strategy or approach is really considering, how a lot of times there's an outcome focus with folks that, feel like they are perfectionistic or have perfectionism tendencies. right? Like controlling the outcome or controlling how someone will react or controlling, how you're perceived. So there's this like outcome, and we want to switch that to being process focused, back to that practice piece. So seeing life as a process and a journey, and all the cliche things we can say about it, but are actually true.
You're right. They didn't come out of thin air. There's a reason people came up with these, expressions.
Exactly. Right. And so being able to have, have a growth mindset and work on, especially, right, we were talking about compassion, that feeling like people may see it as like an inhibitor, and instead seeing it as like an opportunity for growth, right? There's always growth ahead. And if we can focus on things being, like a process or a growth experience, as opposed to it has to look a certain way or it has to be an outcome, that can also be a really useful mindset.
Yes, there's so much of our upbringing that created a fixed mindset. Yeah. So yes, I think turning that attention to, again, how does this limit us when we have a fixed mindset, and then what does a growth mindset look like, and how can we?
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say another trait, because you asked about those, is like not trying something new because you're worried you won't be good at it. And that's a really good example of focusing on the outcome. I need to be good at this thing, so I won't try new things. And so sometimes, right, the therapy homework is, let's try something new. Let's sign up for a ceramics class. Let's go to a dance class. And that value's there. Like, I want to do this thing, but I'm scared because I won't be good at it and people will judge me and I'll be bad and da. And so helping someone see more of the process. Well, what did we learn? Okay, we learned how to get creative, or we learned, how to do this dance. And how was it? Was it fun? Was it scary? Okay, like that's part of the process, as opposed to I can only do this dance class if I'm going to be a professional dancer. I can only do this ceramic class if I'm suddenly going to have a whole pottery set for my dining room.
It's supposed to be fun and messy. I think that's a big one for perfectionists, learning to accept life is messy. Things are supposed to be messier, especially early.
Exactly.
It's not even like I have to do it perfect, but I have to do it perfect the first time. I think that's usually like one of the biggest expectations. Perfections placed on ourselves. Totally. So learning to check in with those, standards that we have, or expectations we have, and questioning it a little.
For sure. I mean, if we could kind of put it in like a 1, 2, 3, or maybe not a 1, 2, 3, but like embrace the messiness, especially because you brought up that, right? The messiness of like our emotions, or going through something, or an experience. So I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a key part here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when you mentioned like the joining a class example, and being maybe embarrassed, like it just reminded me again how much perfectionism is also rooted in shame. Like there's we can't be messy because it's shameful, right? Maybe we did get those shaming critical messages or voices growing up, right? Just attribute it to that. So learning to break free from the shame as well.
Someone shared, it's making me think that we are afraid of flow because it's such an intimate experience with life. That process piece, right?
I wonder if it makes, I'm thinking like the word intimate, and feel free to follow up with it if I got it wrong. Like when I read intimate, I'm thinking like vulnerability. Like there's a lot of fear around vulnerability when it comes to perfectionism, opening up and being our true self, right?
That's how I read it too. Maybe you can share with us, Bonnie, if
Love
that's what
more.
you're.
Anyone else want to chime in? Definitely. We'll make space for questions. Absolutely. I think it's worth making that discussion around this. I was going to say, speaking of cliches, because you brought up a cliche expression, I will too. I remember hearing this quote, and it just really resonated with me, like about trusting ourselves to handle stressful situations instead of avoiding the stress, right? Something like, the bird isn't relying on the branch; it's relying on its wings to fly. So it's like that's kind of, I think, such a great analogy of life. Like, we can't rely on things going perfectly, but we can tune in on ourselves and our resources and our strengths to be able to manage stress, and so trying to avoid anything that's bad or negative. Right? So it's like embracing.
I haven't heard that.
Oh, you haven't? Yeah. heard it we're fairly recently, and it just really like resonated with me. Yeah. So, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, since you brought up cliches, I'm like, I'll just bring it up. It's fair game now. Yeah.
But it's such a good one. To your
It
point, like
is.
relying on
Thank
that
you.
branch is
Mm-hmm.
relying on the outcome or what you expect to happen or what you want will happen or what
Yes.
you think will create, the safe experience. And sometimes that branch won't always be there. And so, right, that like cultivating our relationship with ourselves is that wing being like us and our beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
If someone perceives me as a certain way, well, what do I know about myself deep down? Not what criticism says about me, but like, what do I actually feel about myself? That can be hard to get to, but when we access that, there's a lot more there that's like, that can create that trust in ourselves.
Yeah, trust. Yeah, I think, yeah, perfectionism is about trust. You're right. Like trusting in ourselves and others tends to be a challenge. But yeah, I think if I were to see which one would I prioritize first, it's probably learning to trust ourselves and our
Mm-hmm.
intuition. And I think with that, that gives us practice to maybe learn to open up and trust others. Like ultimately, I think that's the way I view it at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. It's so connected too, right? Because the values piece fits in here really beautifully because intuition will tell us what we care about or what matters to us. And a lot of that external expectation will fuel certain values that may not actually be ours, but that we think we should have. And so being able to connect with like, yeah, who we really are, what is our true self, what are our personal values, does that align with what our perfectionist part wants? Usually no, or sometimes yes, but maybe there's a different way to connect with that value that's less focused on how it should look.
And being okay with difference of opinions or difference of values, right? Because I think so much of perfectionism, because again, if we're thinking like it's shame based, right? Difference of values, right? Or this person doesn't agree with me, it felt so shameful. Like I must have gotten it wrong, or I'm doing something wrong. So I think, yeah, if we're talking about kind of overcoming perfectionism, that's going to be key too. Like it's okay. Like if that's what feels right to you or true to you, right? It's healthy for you. Then it's okay to have a difference of opinion. Like doesn't mean you're wrong, right? It doesn't. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that well, but yeah, I
Absolutely.
noticed that tends to be a theme as well with
Mm-hmm.
perfectionism. So, and then that's probably why we rely on perfectionism. So then we're thinking, oh, okay, I have to do what other people say is right, and then we're not
Mm-hmm.
living maybe our true authentic life. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Let's see. Yeah, I know. Again, we could talk about this for hours, but what are some? I think this is another great question. What are some signs that someone is moving toward healing or change in their perfectionism?
Ooh, I would say kind of like the approaches, right? Progress may look like having more compassion. It may look like having more flexibility, psychologically, having different ways of thinking about experiences. It can look like feeling more connected to that internal sense. Um, it can look like asking for help, you know? It
Yeah,
can look like,
the vulnerability, right?
yeah,
Yeah. It's like I
yeah.
can't do it all. I can't figure this out, and that's okay.
And
Yeah.
that's okay, right? And that doesn't mean something about me. It doesn't mean I'm not good or I'm not hardworking. It just means I'm a human and I need freaking help. So, yeah, that's definitely, I think, a sign of healing and progress around someone realizing that they can, that they're allowed to set a boundary or that the goal of relationships isn't to be liked, it's to be in connection. So definitely some of those markers that are so related to the strategies that they can be helpful signs of like, oh yeah, I guess I was a little kinder to myself, or I guess I delegated this and that actually made me have more capacity to finish this thing. I don't know.
That's,
Yeah. What are some of the markers you feel you see?
yeah. I guess first I want to share like when you said boundaries, that was what came up earlier, and I forgot, like the word slipped out of my mind. But when we're talking about like trusting ourselves maybe first, ultimately, before we can trust others, like if that's the end game, like or end goal rather, how boundaries play a role into that, right? So if we recognize, yeah, if we could trust with our, intuition and what our values are, that's when we learn what appropriate boundaries we want to set with others, and then I think that is the kind of get what's the word I'm looking for? It kind of helps us get into the trusting to others place. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Like once we know what my boundaries are, and believing we're deserving of, and setting those boundaries and expressing those needs. I think that's what kind of helps us trust others more. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I think once my clients are saying like, I set this boundary, yes, that's like the most exciting moment. Yeah, I think that's how usually it gives me key sign or key indicator that they were healing or on their way.
Yeah. Especially with being, sometimes I find and boundaries can be really hard to set at first, and it can come with feeling guilt a lot of the times, and that's okay. Often say like, that's all right. We can feel guilt and set a boundary. The more we practice that, you may see that that's a really big act of self-care, and that nothing bad happens, or if something does, that's information about this dynamic or relationship. So, again, like back to that goal, the goal isn't to not feel uncomfortable emotions, it's to be able to handle them and tolerate them. Yeah, so that's a big part of boundaries that I think maybe the internet plays a role in this, of expecting boundaries. You just like do it and you feel so confident. It's like, no, not always. It takes time, right? And it won't always feel good, but is it a sign that you're connected to yourself and your capacity and your limits and what's not possible for you, or all of that?
That's a great way to explain boundaries. I think, and you're right, like social media maybe it's one of those terms that maybe comes up on social media, but what does it mean in a therapeutic context and in the real world context, right? Like, I think sometimes there's that misconception, like boundaries are something like, yes, we want to try it, but then we expect like everyone's going to be okay with the boundary just because you said it. I think that's like another dialogue to have too, is you're allowed to set it, and then the other person's allowed to have a reaction for it. And again, it doesn't mean you were wrong to set your boundary. Right. It just, again, means a difference of opinion, right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's always that fear of like, I'm doing something bad or wrong, or I'm being mean because of someone's reaction to the boundary. And then again, normalizing that discomfort, like it's okay. It might not go the way you manage it in there or perfectly, and that's normal, and that's okay.
Yes, exactly. Well said.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, I think we have one more I have over here. If there's one thing you wish everyone with perfectionism knew or understood, what would it be? Just kind of, I guess, summarize today's discussion.
When we were talking about the fear around compassion, or working out of perfectionism means you suddenly will like lose parts of yourself. And I think that's something I would want someone to take away, is like, you can still be that person that has goals and a vision for certain things, and you can like things to be a certain way. Like, that's okay. And can we help that part of you no longer have so much fear, right? Like, perfectionism can be healthily expressed. I think sometimes we think like, then you can't have any of these traits, and it's like, no, there can be more flexibility, or there can be a little more like compassion with them. Yeah, exactly. But I think there's just like fear of, if I don't identify in this way, I'll never get the things I want in my life. Where that's not how working out of it has to look, right? We can integrate parts of ourselves and also have it be from all the things we're talking about today, from a compassionate place, from a values place, from like a trust place, and not so much of the angst. And we kind of have to just see what happens, right? Like, let's take that risk and see what comes with you in your healing process, and maybe things that you shed that aren't really you, and they were just protective mechanisms that your body trusts you don't need anymore.
Yeah, that's a amazing point you're bringing. Like, it is a coping mechanism at the end of the day, perfectionism. So check in with ourselves, like, am I doing this because I feel like I have to survive, versus am I doing this because this is going to help me thrive? And check in. And I'm so appreciative that you brought up that was on my mind earlier, the goal piece. I think that comes up a lot with my clients, which is, well, if I'm not a perfectionist, then like, then that means I'm just gonna get rid of my goals, like, and not have anything to strive for. Like, that tends to be connected or correlated, I think, with perfectionism. Like, perfectionism equals being an achiever, right? And having ambition. And then that fear of, well, if I'm letting go of my perfectionism or overcoming it, then that means I have nothing to strive for. And I think just kind of addressing that way of belief system as well. That's not the case. You still have your goals. Yeah, you still want your, have your ambitions in life. It's just how are we approaching it with more flexibility and compassion and growth mindset, as we were saying.
Exactly.
I'll keep
right.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll turn it over if anyone, has questions or comments. And then, in the meantime, if anything's coming up for you that you wanted to add, feel free to do that as well.
Yeah. No, this was a fun conversation. It is a topic I love, so I'm glad that we could both connect on it.
Same. Yeah, like you said, I'm sure there's so much more we can talk about or expand on. We're just passionate about it because we know what life on the other side of perfectionism looks like, and it's just so exciting when we get to see our clients get there, and exciting for them too, I'm sure.
Definitely, yeah. I'm curious, maybe as we wrap up, what you feel you would share of something you would want people to know.
Ooh, that's a good question. Gosh, they really. I think that's one of those mistaken beliefs. They have to rely on their perfectionism to succeed. I think that's the one thing I would address. That's not true. You don't have to. If anything, from personal experience, I could say that it limits. It really does.
Yeah.
It helps you in some ways. Yes, you wouldn't get as far as you did to this day without perfectionism, probably because we relied on it for so long. But there's so much more you can do without it, and you just don't know it yet. And I promise you, it's there. It's there, and it's going to be hard to break from perfectionism because again, we just relied on so much and for so long. But it's definitely 100% worthwhile to go through those challenges and overcome.
Definitely,
so much better afterwards.
I'm with you. I agree. So hopefully we
much
can...
more stress-free, more peaceful, more connected to yourself and others, I would say. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yes. Of course. Yeah, thank you. Someone commented. Our pleasure. Yeah. Thanks for joining. All right. So I think my goal, I think I mentioned, I'm pretty sure I set it up so that it automatically records, I think, live, or I think it's already set up that way. So I'm happy to post this if you're okay with that for later views and watches. I guess we could kind of bid adieu here, and happy to follow up on social media if people have questions on there as well. They can reach out on our website, or actually maybe that's a great topic too. How would you want people to contact you if you're open to that, inquiries and so on and so forth?
Yeah, this space is fine. I try to be responsive to DMs. Or my website, www.joannatownsend.com. There's a link on my page, so that'll take you there.
Great. Yes. Same here for me. So you can, on my page, I think it's a link tree. So it has different links on there. So you're welcome to find my website there or my blog or whatever it might be for any other additional questions. And here as well, on social. All right, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Stay warm.
So fun to chat. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.